Satoru Gojo cannot be touched. Not in theory. Literally, physically, at the atomic level. Nothing in existence can reach him. That is what the 6 Eyes and Limitless technique do. They do not make you stronger, they make you untouchable. Now give that to Peter Parker. Not a version of Peter who doesn't get hurt anymore. The exact same Peter. The one whose entire identity is built on absorbing punishment, losing people he loves, and pushing through when no one else can. But now nothing, nowhere, ever touches him again. Your brain ignites. Thermal radiation off every bolt in the scaffolding. Kinetic energy of the multiversal rifts tearing open above the Statue of Liberty. Your spider sense isn't giving you half a second of warning anymore. It's showing you the atomic reality of the universe all at once. And your teenage brain is absolutely screaming, trying to keep up. The multiverse just chose you. And the brutally uncomfortable question this video ends on: what happens to a character defined entirely by his vulnerability when that vulnerability gets erased? To make this crossover work perfectly within the established MCU continuity, we have to look at the exact moment Peter gains these abilities. We're not gonna assume he was born with them. We're tying this directly to the multiversal chaos of Spider-Man No Way Home. The scene is the Statue of Liberty. The Green Goblin has just thrown a pumpkin bomb into a box containing Doctor Strange's corrupted spell. The box explodes. The fabric of reality physically tears open, revealing purple rifts in the sky. The multiverse is bleeding into Peter's world. But in this timeline, it isn't just silhouette variants of classic villains trying to slip through the cracks. The structural rules of different universes also bleed over. As Peter stands on the scaffolding, trying to figure out how to stop the sky from collapsing, a surge of multiversal cursed energy strikes him directly. In the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, the 6 Eyes is a genetic anomaly bound to fate. It appears when the world desperately needs balance. Here, the multiversal tear recognizes Peter's spider sense as an advanced spatial awareness technique. The cosmic energy latches onto his DNA and rewrites his biology to balance a massive influx of multiversal threats. The moment the energy strikes him, Peter collapses. He doesn't feel a normal jolt of pain. He feels his brain physically expanding. The 6 Eyes aren't just a cool visual upgrade. They're a massive influx of information. For a normal human, receiving the 6 Eyes would instantly cause brain death. The human mind simply isn't built to process the world at an atomic level. But Peter Parker isn't a normal human. He's a science prodigy with enhanced biology that's already operating beyond the limits of standard human neurology. The 6 Eyes finds a compatible host. When Peter opens his eyes, he doesn't just see the scaffolding anymore. He sees the thermal radiation coming off the metal. He sees the microscopic dust particles floating in the air. He can calculate the mass, speed, and trajectory of every single object in a 5-mile radius simultaneously. His spider sense used to give him just a brief warning when danger was near. Now, combined with the 6 Eyes, his brain is calculating the reality of the entire universe every single second. Doctor Strange floats down next to him, struggling to contain the spell. In the original timeline, this is where Peter tells Strange to cast a new spell, making the entire world forget Peter Parker exists. But in this timeline, Peter's newly awakened brain processes the magical tear on a quantum level. "Don't erase me!" Peter screams. "The structural integrity is failing at the dimensional anchors. Close the loop, Strange! Close the loop!" Strange is shocked that a teenager just solved a multi-dimensional equation in real time, but he doesn't have time to argue. Strange weaves the magic exactly as Peter instructs. The spell fires, the multiversal variants are sent home, and the glowing rift snaps shut. The world is saved, and most importantly, the memory wipe never happens. The next few days are absolute agony for Peter. He isolates himself completely. The grief of losing Aunt May is suffocating, but it's competing with the physical torture happening inside his own skull. Every time he opens his eyes, the sensory overload causes his nose to bleed. He can't look out a window without processing the chemical composition of the smog in the air. He can't look at a TV without seeing the exact frequency of the light waves. He realizes that if he doesn't figure out a way to filter this information, his brain will literally melt from the processing demands. But because he's a science prodigy, he understands he needs to drastically reduce the optical input immediately. He crawls over to his messy workbench, keeping his eyes squeezed shut to block out the overwhelming data stream. He grabs a roll of electrical tape and some welding goggles he uses for building web shooters. He layers it over his eyes, tying a makeshift blindfold around his head. Instantly, the headache drops from a 10 down to a 4. With the thick blindfold on, he can still see perfectly. The 6 Eyes allows him to perceive the physical world through the flow of energy and mass. The blindfold acts as a filter, lowering the resolution of the universe so his teenage brain can actually process it without frying itself. He sits on the edge of his bed. He looks at his hands. He can see the exact cellular structure of his skin. He can feel the strange new energy pooling in his stomach. This is cursed energy, though Peter just thinks of it as a new biological power source. Over the next few weeks, Peter's entire daily routine changes. He has to redesign his Spider-Man suit. The eye lenses are gone. He replaces them with armored lenses that let zero light in. When he walks around as Peter Parker in his daily life, he has to wear dark sunglasses indoors. He tells everyone he has a severe medical sensitivity to light caused by a chemical accident. He has to navigate a world that knows his secret identity. Paparazzi follow him. People stare at him on the street, but because of his new sensory processing, it doesn't overwhelm him the way it used to. He can tune them out. He finally meets up with Ned and MJ at a quiet coffee shop. "Dude, you're wearing sunglasses inside," Ned whispers, leaning across the table and looking around to make sure nobody's listening to them. "You look like a blind secret agent. Are you okay? The news hasn't stopped talking about you since the statue." Peter just smiles. "It's a migraine thing, Ned. Trust me, I can see you perfectly." And he really can. He can see the steam rising from Ned's hot chocolate. He can hear the exact heartbeat of every customer in the room. He knows that MJ is anxious because he can see her kinetic micro-expressions and the slight spike in her body temperature, but he still doesn't fully understand what he's carrying yet. The real education is about to start. The discovery of the Limitless technique happens entirely by accident. It's late at night. Peter spots a group of armed criminals sprinting out of a bank in downtown Manhattan. They're carrying heavy duffel bags filled with cash and repurposed damage control assault rifles that fire heavy energy rounds. Peter drops down into the alleyway, blocking their escape path. Alright guys, I know banking hours are confusing, but withdrawals usually require an ATM card, not an energy rifle. The robbers don't laugh. The leader panics, raises his rifle, and holds down the trigger. Normally, Peter's spider sense would force his body to flip backwards immediately, but this time, his brain doesn't tell him to move. The sixth size instantly calculates the velocity of the energy blast, the mass of the projectiles, and the distance between the gun and his chest. And then, his new cursed energy acts on instinct. Peter stands completely still. He doesn't flinch. The energy rounds fly towards him at supersonic speeds, but as they get close to his chest, they start to slow down. The closer they get to his suit, the slower they move. It looks like they're hitting an invisible wall of thick gelatin. When they're a millimeter away from the fabric of his suit, the energy blast stops in midair, frozen in space. The robbers stop shooting. Their jaw drops in horror. Peter looks down at his own chest. He sees the glowing hot energy rounds floating harmlessly in front of him. Because Peter is a science prodigy, his mind understands what is happening. He remembers learning about the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise in his physics class. In order for an object to reach a destination, it first has to travel half the distance. Then it has to travel half the remaining distance. Then half of that. If you keep dividing the distance infinitely, the object never actually arrives. Somehow his body is projecting that paradox into the physical world. He has created a literal shield of infinity around him. He casually reaches out and plucks one of the floating energy rounds from the air. Okay, nope, that's impossible. I definitely didn't study for this. The robbers drop their guns and run away. They don't even try to fight. They just watched him stop a wall of energy with his mind. Peter easily webs them to a lamppost. He realizes the fundamental rule of his entire life has just been shattered. He doesn't have to dodge anymore. It's physically impossible for anything to touch him without his permission. The true impact of the Limitless technique becomes obvious when Peter starts facing his classic rogue gallery. For years, Peter's villains relied on overwhelming physical force. Characters like the Rhino, the Shocker, and the Scorpion built their entire identities around being bigger, stronger, and more brutal than Spider-Man. They expected him to bounce around, get tired, and eventually make a mistake so they could crush him. When you introduce Gojo's Infinity Shield to Marvel villains, you break their reality. Let's look at a fight against Matt Gargan, the Scorpion. Gargan escapes from prison and meets up with Phineas Mason, the Tinkerer. Mason builds Gargan a new mechanical tail constructed from salvaged damage control technology and stolen Stark armor plating. Gargan goes on a rampage through the financial district, destroying cars and screaming for Peter Parker to show his face, knowing full well who's under the mask. Peter drops down onto the street, standing directly in Gargan's path, wearing his new suit. "I've been waiting for this for years, Parker!" Gargan roars. "I'm gonna rip you in half!" Gargan lunges forward with insane speed. He thrusts the tail directly at Peter's chest, aiming to impale him. In the past, Peter would have vaulted over the tail at the last possible second, using Gargan's momentum against him. This time, Peter just puts his hand in his pockets and stands still. The tail strikes. It slams directly into Peter's Infinity Shield. The massive kinetic energy of a multi-ton weapon hitting at insane speed meets the concept of endless space. The tail's forward momentum is halted. The shockwave of the sudden stop shatters the windows of the surrounding buildings. But Peter doesn't move an inch. The tail is stuck in midair. Gargan's servos whine, pushing with everything they have, but the tail simply can't move forward. What is this?" Gargan stammers. He swings his fist, but it gets stuck in the invisible barrier too. Peter just sighs. "Mac," Peter says, "you're trying to cross an infinite amount of space. You don't have enough time in the universe to reach me." Peter casually flicks his finger against the tail. Using his enhanced spider strength combined with the force of his new energy, Peter sends the villain flying backward. Gargan crashes through a city bus, knocked out cold by the force of a single flick. Peter webs into a streetlight and pulls out his phone to call the police. A bystander rushes over, hand outstretched. "Spider-Man! Oh my god, are you okay? That was insane!" Peter reaches for the handshake instinctively. His brain fires before he can stop it. Bone density, 1.2 kilograms per cubic centimeter. Radial nerve pathway, optimal pressure point for incapacitation. Peter yanks his hand back. "Sorry, I'm good. Thanks, man. Never mind." The guy looks confused. Peter turns away before the expression on his face has time to stick. Strange's words hadn't found him yet, but the glass box was already being built, one calculation at a time. The first person to figure out what Peter was really capable of wasn't another villain. It was a sorcerer. You can't actively manipulate the fabric of space and reality in New York City without drawing the attention of the master of the mystic arts. Stephen Strange is sitting in the Sanctum Sanctorum when he feels a ripple in the local space-time continuum. It isn't standard magic. It isn't cosmic energy from an infinity stone. It feels like something is taking the laws of geometry and bending them. Strange tracks the anomaly to a rooftop in Queens. He floats down, his cloak of levitation billowing behind him. He finds Peter sitting on a ledge, eating a churro. "Parker," Strange says, "what exactly have you done to yourself?" "Hey sir, just having a snack. Want a piece?" "I don't want a pastry, Peter. I want to know why the reality around your body is folding in on itself. You are generating a spatial paradox. That is incredibly dangerous. Have you been tampering with multiversal artifacts? It's not magic. It's just math and energy. I can see it all now. The multiversal tear did something to my DNA." Strange is skeptical. He assumes Peter's new power is unstable and dangerous. Strange raises his hands, summoning two glowing orange rings. He throws a spell directly at Peter, intending to lock him in a magical chain so he can safely examine him. The magical chains fly towards Peter, and just like the bullets, they slow down and stop in midair, frozen against the Infinity Shield. Strange narrows his eyes. The spatial barrier. Strange murmurs. Fascinating. But magic doesn't just rely on physical space, Peter. Strange shifts tactics. He decides to bypass physical reality entirely. He steps forward and throws a palm strike aimed directly at Peter's chest, intending to use the exact same projection technique the Ancient One used on Bruce Banner. He wants to push Peter's soul directly out of his physical body. But Peter isn't a normal human anymore. The Six Eyes detect the flow of astral energy itself. As Strange's magical strike attempts to bypass the Infinity Shield, Peter actually sees the astral energy coming. His body reacts instinctively. Peter floods his own soul with dense cursed energy, anchoring his astral form to his physical body like a lead weight. Strange's palm connects with the barrier, but the astral push fails. Peter's soul doesn't budge. Strange floats backwards, stunned. You anchored your own astral form? Your processing speed is beyond human. I told you, sir. I can see everything now. Strange decides to escalate. If he can't hit Peter in the real world, he'll change the world itself. Strange punches the air and drags Peter into the mirror dimension. The city around them folds and twists. Buildings rotate upside down. Strange launches a barrage of attacks. He folds the ground beneath Peter's feet and attempts to crush him between two skyscrapers. But Peter understands the geometry of the mirror dimension better than Strange realizes. Because the Six Eyes allow him to perceive the atomic structure of energy, Peter actually sees the formula behind Strange's dimension folding before it even happens. Peter raises his hand. He channels his cursed energy, forcing the concept of negative distance into reality. This is Curse Technique Lapse Blue. A blue sphere appears at the tip of Peter's fingers. It acts as a black hole. Peter snaps his fingers, and the blue sphere expands. The buildings Strange threw at him are instantly pulled into the blue singularity. But more importantly, the gravitational pull of blue begins to destabilize the geometry of the mirror dimension itself. The fractal glass of the dimension begins to crack and splinter. Strange realizes instantly that if Peter keeps the blue singularity open, it will shatter the section of the mirror dimension, causing irreparable damage to the magical infrastructure. Stop! Strange commands. They return to the real world rooftop. Strange looks at Peter with a mixture of awe and deep concern. He realizes that both spatial and non-spatial magic have real limits when they run into this kid. Peter, Strange says softly, I have read ancient texts about beings who achieve this level of spatial dominance. It rarely ends well. He pauses. When nothing can touch you, you stop feeling connected to humanity. You become isolated. This power will alienate you from everyone you love. Peter is quiet for a moment. I know, he says. The first few days, when I put on the blindfold, I felt like I was locked in a glass box. I can see everyone, but nobody can reach me. He looks up at Strange, but I'm not going to let it change who I am. I don't want to be a god. I just want to keep my neighborhood safe. Strange nods slowly. He realizes that if anyone in the multiverse has the moral compass to handle the power of infinity, it's the kid from Queens. What Strange doesn't realize is that the whole conversation was already being analyzed. Somewhere across town, Phineas Mason is watching a grainy long-range recording of the rooftop. He rewinds it. He watches a chain stop. He watches the buildings collapse into the blue singularity. He watches a kid just stand there, hand in pockets, eating half a churro. Mason sets down his coffee and opens a new file on his laptop. The Tinkerer starts taking notes. It doesn't take long for the rest of the heroes to realize that Spider-Man has leveled up. Following the events of Endgame, there's no official Avengers compound anymore. The team is scattered, but they still communicate when massive threats arise. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, and Bruce Banner are sitting at a secure off-the-book Saber Coordination Center on Earth. On the monitor in front of them is security footage. They watch Peter point one finger at a 5-story buildings where the falling debris during a fire in the Bronx. He calculates the exact output. He fires an invisible blast of repulsive force, Curse Technique Reversal Red, and the falling rubble floats gently to the ground like leaves off a tree. Then he uses short bursts of blue to pull trapped civilians directly out of burning windows, compressing the space between them and the ground, depositing them into his arms safely. Sam watches Peter do all of this in about 8 seconds without breaking a sweat. He backs the footage up, watches it again. Wong, the actual Sorcerer Supreme, is in attendance to provide magical context. Carol Danvers dials in via holographic projection from space. You aren't just a street-level brawler anymore, Spider-Man, Sam Wilson says when Peter arrives. You're operating on a different tier entirely. We need someone with your capability on the global roster. They invite Peter to become a central figure in their new coalition of heroes. Their heavy hitter, the guy they call when an alien armada shows up in orbit. Peter sits at the metal table, wearing his dark glasses. He listens to the full pitch. He respects Sam and Bruce enormously, and then he says no. I appreciate it, guys. Really, I do, Peter says. But if I become your cosmic deterrent, who looks out for the guy getting mugged in Queens? Who stops the car accidents? You guys handle the big global stuff. You fight the intergalactic warlords. I'm staying on the ground. Bruce Banner smiles. He understands the burden of too much power better than almost anyone. We aren't going to force you, Peter, but know that if things get too heavy, you have a support system. Peter nods. He downplays what he's capable of, keeping the other heroes from relying on him too heavily. He wants Sam and the rest to keep protecting the world while he protects his neighborhood. The real reason he said no was the one he didn't mention out loud. Strange's warning hadn't left him. Every hour behind the blindfold, every time he calculated someone's bone density instead of shaking their hand, he felt slightly less human. And the last thing he needed was to stop fighting for people he actually knew. What Peter didn't account for was that the Tinkerer had been watching every second of this too, and Mason had just figured out exactly how to break him. Matt Gargan is not a tactical genius, but Phineas Mason absolutely is. Mason watches all the footage. He analyzes the Infinity Shield from every angle he can find. He figures out quickly that physical violence is completely useless against a new Spider-Man. If you can't kill the hero, you break his spirit. You force him into an impossible situation. Mason and Gargan orchestrate a coordinated terrorist attack across 3 different boroughs of New York City simultaneously. They use modified, stolen damage-controlled drones and repurposed dark tech to rig the Brooklyn Bridge with explosives. They derail a subway train filled with passengers in Manhattan, and then they program a fleet of automated combat drones to fire on a crowded outdoor concert in Central Park. They broadcast a message directly to Peter's suit frequency. "You think you're untouchable now, bug?" Gargan says. "Nothing can hurt you, but you can't be in 3 places at once. Let's see how much that fancy shield helps when the people you love are bleeding out." Gargan expects panic, but he severely underestimates what a genius teenager can do with 6 eyes and the Limitless technique. Peter doesn't panic. He floats above the city. He pulls his blindfold down. The sensory input is agonizing. His nose starts bleeding immediately, but he needs the raw processing power for what he's about to do. He looks at the entire city simultaneously. He calculates the exact distance between the Brooklyn Bridge, the subway tunnel, and Central Park. He processes the speed of the falling train, the timers on the explosives, and the flight paths of the stolen drones all at once. Satoru Gojo used short-range teleportation by compressing space. Peter decides to push the boundaries of physics to the absolute limit. He uses blue to compress the space between himself and the Brooklyn Bridge. He instantly teleports to the bridge. He doesn't waste time disarming the bombs manually, containing the blast radius entirely. The bombs detonate, but the explosion is trapped inside the void. Less than a second later, he teleports to the subway tunnel. The train is tipping off the tracks. Peter uses a perfectly calibrated red blast to push the train back onto the rails, stabilizing the heavy metal cars with sheer force. Finally, he teleports to Central Park. The damage control drones are firing energy rounds into the crowd. Peter drops from the sky and expands his infinity shield to cover the entire concert venue. A dome of space forms over thousands of people. The energy blasts hit the dome and freeze in midair. He did all of this in less than 2 seconds. Gargan is standing on a nearby rooftop, holding a detonator, watching his entire master plan disintegrate. He is absolutely speechless. He thought he could outsmart the kid. He thought he could break him. Peter teleports directly in front of Gargan. "You're right, Mac," Peter says. "I can't be in 3 places at once. But when I can erase the distance between them, it really doesn't matter." Peter casually crushes a detonator, webs Gargan up, and leaves him for the police. But even as he swings away, he realizes something unsettling. He just covered a city grid the size of a dozen neighborhoods in under 5 seconds without breaking a sweat. And the thought that follows isn't pride. It's a quiet, terrifying question. How much further does his power go? Peter tries his hardest to avoid using lethal force. He's still Spider-Man. He believes in second chances. But eventually, the universe throws a threat at him that cannot be reasoned with, punched or webbed up. At the end of No Way Home, a tiny piece of the Venom symbiote was left behind in a bar in Mexico. Over the next few months, that alien biomass grows, multiplies, and eventually makes its way to New York. It doesn't bond with a single host. It creates a hive mind cluster of Clintar symbiotes. Thousands of black liquid alien parasites swarm out of the sewers, bonding with civilians and wildlife, turning them into violent monsters. The military tries to contain the symbiotes, but their bullets just get absorbed by the alien biomass. The swarm starts marching towards the heart of Manhattan. If they reach the dense population centers, the entire city will be assimilated in hours. Peter stands alone on the George Washington Bridge, watching the massive tide of black sludge rolling towards him. He runs the calculations. Webs won't work. Punching them won't work. Red and blue will just scatter the symbiotes, allowing them to reform and attack elsewhere. He has to erase the biomass from existence to save the city. He has to use the ultimate extension of the Limitless technique. But Peter doesn't raise his hands yet. He stands there for a moment that feels like much longer than it is. The 6 eyes are showing him something he doesn't want to see. The symbiote hive isn't an army with a plan. It's a biological organism responding to fear and hunger. It's confused by this reality. It didn't choose to be here. The individual creatures that make up the swarm, they're just alive, in the way that all living things are alive, doing the only thing they know how to do. Some of the bonded hosts at the edge of the swarm are still fighting it. He can see their bodies tensing against the black mass covering them. This isn't a clean situation. There's no clean option. He raises his right hand and forms a sign for blue. The black hole forms, vibrating with intense magnetic energy. He raises his left hand and forms a sign for red. The bright red sphere of repulsive energy flares to life. The 6 eyes process the exact atomic composition of the symbiote swarm. Every organism, every host, every lost terrified piece of alien biology that never asked to end up on a bridge in New York. "I'm sorry," Peter whispers. He claps his hands together. The collision creates imaginary mass, a force that simply erases whatever it touches from reality. This is hollow purple. A massive sphere of blinding purple energy erupts from Peter's hands. It doesn't explode like a standard bomb. It moves forward in a perfect straight line. The purple sphere carves a trench through the bridge and the river below. It hits the symbiote swarm. There's no sound. There's no physical struggle. The alien biomass doesn't burn or melt. It is simply deleted from the fabric of reality. The hollow purple goes entirely through the swarm, soaring up into the atmosphere and disappearing into deep space, leaving a circular trench in the ground where the aliens used to be. Peter drops to his knees on the bridge. He's exhausted, but more than that, he's psychologically terrified. He just erased thousands of living organisms from existence in a fraction of a second. He looks at his hands. He realizes that he holds the power to vaporize the entire planet if he makes a mistake, or if he decides to. That's the part that scares him. This is where the story reaches its emotional core. Satoru Gojo embraced his power. He walked around with supreme arrogance because he knew nobody could touch him. He accepted the deep isolation of being the strongest. He turned his untouchability into a personality. But Peter Parker is built on love. He's built on human connection. The realization that he is now a walking weapon of mass destruction sends him into a deep depression. He stops taking off his blindfold. Even when he's alone in his apartment, he's terrified of accidentally activating his powers. He stops answering texts. He tells himself it's temporary, that he just needs time to recalibrate. But the hours turn into days. One rainy evening, MJ climbs a fire escape and knocks on his bedroom window. Peter unlocks it and lets her in. "You've been avoiding us," MJ says. "You didn't show up to decathlon practice. You aren't answering your texts." Ned thinks you're mad at him. "MJ, I can't be around you guys right now. It's too dangerous. You don't understand what my brain is doing. Every second I look at you, I calculate the exact force it would take to—" He stops. He starts again. "I have to force the universe to keep you safe. I'm a monster." MJ walks over to him. She doesn't hesitate. She reaches out and grabs his hand. She doesn't let go. "You aren't a monster, Peter," MJ says. "You're a math nerd who got too much power. But you're still the exact same guy who cried during the sad dog movie last year. Power doesn't change who you are. You change who you are." Peter is quiet for a long time. See, Strange was actually describing Gojo, not him. Gojo was isolated because he looked down on everyone else. But Peter doesn't look down on anyone. He sees the fragility of human life, and it makes him want to protect it more, not less. The glass box isn't something that Power built around him. It's something he'd been constructing himself, one refusal at a time. Isolation is a choice. Over the following weeks, Peter completely rethinks his approach to the Six Eyes. He doesn't try to suppress the power or run from it. He trains his brain to treat it the way he treats his spider sense, as a tool with the threshold. Instead of keeping the Infinity Shield active at all times and letting it read every person around him as a potential physics problem, he trains himself to only filter for actual threats. The rest of the world he learns to just see. He and Ned grab lunch. He doesn't calculate anything. He just eats a sandwich. It takes work, but it's the most important kind of work he's ever done.